But I don't know. I don't really know what the solution is. I mean, as Barney was saying, it'd be nice to have some other kind of industry in Alpine, but the question is what? That's the question facing every city, big and little, in this country.
Do you do the bentonite plant? Do you do a prison? That seems to be the small town economy salvation of most of Texas. And frankly, I think I'd rather not see that in your area. You may say, we need a prison. It's what kind of economy? I think, relatively speaking, the visitation, the impact is very light at this point. And you're right to be talking about it now, because
Exactly.
maybe 20 years down the line it's going to become a bigger issue. But except for chili cook-off weekend and spring break, I don't see a whole lot of that being loved to death that I see in other places. And in fact, it's the one place that seems to be able to handle people getting away from it all. To me, the good news is it's not the kind of tourists that at the Grand Canyon, you go to Tusayan, you go beyond, people get out of their car, they look over that big ditch, and they get back in their car and they're gone. Big Bend is too hard to get to. It's a pain in the ass, and most people won't do it. That's why I don't feel too intimidated about writing about it. I think it's okay. I think when we walked across Big Bend National Park from Rio Grande Village to Lajitas, we wrote about it. I don't think a whole lot of people picked up that issue of Parks and Wildlife and said, let's do this.
They were smart.
If we do a service, it's we let people live vicariously through our stupidity.
Well, I'm glad you brought that trip up, Joe Nick, because I wanted to ask you and Laurence to just kind of quickly tell the story of that epic voyage.
Oh, God.
Yeah, what started it? I'm still trying to remember.
I think I somehow hatched up the idea, and I said, hey, Joe Nick, we ought to hike across the park. And I was thinking, surely he's going to talk me out of this idea. He goes, yeah, let's do it. I'm like, oh, no. Now I got to go.
No, it was a defining trip. I mean, it was really hard. We did a lot of fudging. How many people did we have? Six. So, but we had Desert Sports, a semi-sag wagon. For the first 2 days, they showed up at the end of the day with water and basically checking on us. We all still want to do this? And every day there was a check. Would we press on? And after about the third day, every day there was a reason to consider, do we keep doing this? Until the last day, when I really thought you lost the bottom of the soles of your feet, you were bleeding and sick, and you knew the route, such as it was. No one knew the route, really. But that was before we climbed up on the Mesa de Anguilla, which was just nuts.
Yeah, that was a hard day. That was a tough day.
But it was a throwdown. Could we do this? And we could. We did. We could.
We all did. All of us.
And it was really hard, but it was really fun, and it felt great all the way to almost the very end on the lookout. We were on this huge mesa, the most isolated part of the national park, and we're fixing to go down into Lajitas, which is like golf course, and it's fake. It's a fake town, a fake place. And we thought about, well, should we just turn around right here? But no, we went down, and then we got picked up by Jim Carrico, who Marcos is right. I mean, Jim Carrico was the Big Bend National Park superintendent. He was one of the first superintendents, if not the first, of the state ranch. And I think he was ready to give Ed Abbey a job in Big Bend before Ed died. He was coming to Big Bend. That's the kind of guy Jim Carrico is. And he's co-owner of Desert Sports. I always recommend trading with him when you're down there if you have a reason. But that trip was just great.
Two of the people that went that hike were a couple pretty attractive women, I think at that point in their early 30s. And they showed up Desert Sports, like he was saying, they dropped some resupply stuff for us a couple of times along the way where we crossed roads. But anyhow, these two friends of ours came, real, pretty cute women, and so I had photo models. But they came into Desert Sports, and they can really dress up and be like city girls. They come in these cute little outfits, and they pull up in their little red BMW car, and they walk into Desert Sports. And Mike Long, the owner there, is kind of this crusty, kind of quiet sort of guy, and he kind of looks at him, goes, you girls know what you're getting into? They go, oh, yeah. And actually, they were actually very fit women. They were fine. But so, of course, at the end of the trip, what they had to do is walk right in there and say, well, we made it, didn't we? So he's like,
Yeah, I
guess
remember
we did."
being back at Desert Sports. It really smelled like goats. It was torn to shit. And the biggest compliment is a friend of mine from Austin, Jamie Mitchell, had gone into there, and he was going on some kind of adventure. But he walked past me, and then he did a double take. He looked back, and he kind of squinted his eyes. He said, "Are you Joe Nick?" I said, "Yeah." And I really felt rode hard and put up wet. But that's why you do those things.
We were pretty rank.
I don't want to take too much away from that, but I got to tell
Front
you,
by a local.
I got to tell you that I've seen 100 foreign exchange students do that hike carrying nothing but a Clorox bottle wrapped in burlap.
Is that a little
What he means by foreign
exaggeration?
exchange students is foreign exchange students.
Well, we did see some tracks from San Vicente headed north. In fact, a whole bunch of tracks. We knew we weren't alone. That's true.
You want to hear a real adventure? I can tell you about my daughter and I driving around San Marcos.
Trying to park here?
So I'm interested to ask then, to cycle back a couple questions when you were talking about
Sorry, Nick.
That's too easy. About tourism and the future of the park in the area. And Dr. Nelson, I wanted to ask you, aside from you worked on this book, much of which was about the writing was about conservation in that book, or about writing about nature in that book. And I wonder if, aside from the chili cook-off, what do you see as the greatest threat to the area in the future? What is the thing that concerns you when you think about the land and the area sort of continuing as it has been?
We talked about this at breakfast too. Y'all should have been at breakfast. I guess we kind of agree that my greatest fear is for people to come there that think they know how it should be and do something that really does change it. Because all of that used to be underwater. So, when you start talking about native or non-native species, if it used to be an ocean, just where do you draw the line there? And so sometimes when people want to do something, they get very passionate about what it is they want to do. And for instance, one of there's an endangered species called the Terlingua cat's eye, or that it's okay to go park your RVs there, and as long as you're drinking beer, we don't worry about the Terlingua cat's eye. But otherwise, everybody gets real worried about those things and wants to do something, and they don't always do the right thing.
So, I mean, that dynamic of people not from the outside coming in and thinking that they know what's best for the area.
Yeah, and it's not just them, but locals don't always know what's best either. But people, it seems like the less somebody knows, and that's one of the things that I tell my students. Say, when you're 18 and you come in here as a freshman, you've got all the answers. And when you're educated and you leave here as a graduate, when somebody asks you a question, I want you to say, I don't know.
So that seems like it gets us back to what Marcos said his job was, doing nothing and making sure nothing happens, that there's a kind of circularity to that. What about you, Marcos? You were talking about that at breakfast, so I know you've thought about it, but when you think about the future of the area and the greatest threats that it faces, what do you think of?
I would say politics is probably the biggest single threat that area faces every day. People's perceptions, the way that folks who have never been to the border perceive the border, I think has huge impact on it.
So specifically, you're talking about politics as they regarding the border and immigration right now.
That's correct.
What do you in that realm? What do you fear? Do you fear the militarization of the border? Is that what you're thinking of?
I think that that's a potential. Although what I really try to keep in mind is that I try to keep a broad perspective, and I realize that none of this is new. This is a pendulum that swings back and forth. Camp Santa Elena was a military camp. The military's been there before. We've had these fears before. During the Escobar uprising, Johnson's Ranch was developed. It was the largest airfield in Texas. We were protecting ourselves from the folks south of us. Some folks don't realize that probably the first aerial bombing campaigns and the first air-to-air combat occurred over the Big Bend, during that time frame. So yeah, militarization is certainly a consideration, and it's something that I wouldn't be surprised to see in the near future. But like I say, it's a pendulum that swings back and forth. Eventually, we come back to our senses and realize that our cousins over there are not very different from us.
Since we're talking a little bit about the border, and I wanted to talk about the Boquillas crossing when that was shut and what that meant for the area and the sort of what it meant in a bigger sense. I don't mean what it meant in terms of logistics. I mean what it meant in a bigger sense when that happened.
Well, of course, the obvious thing I think that most folks are aware of is that we cut off the lifeblood of those communities. They were as dependent on tourism as the folks in Terlingua and Alpine and Studi Butte are. That was their, that was what they depended on, and we cut them off and left them high and dry. And of course, that there's a move now to
reopen it,
the crossing.
Yeah, and how is that?
By this time next year, it should be open.
That's great. And who are the prime agents behind making that happen?
Probably the same folks that were behind closing. I mean, truth be known, although they didn't exist then, the Department of Homeland Security was Customs and Border Patrol. That, along with the Park Service, all of these federal agencies really had a hand in shutting it down, and they are all involved in opening it back up. We have formed a group recently. When we heard that they were opening up, we felt like that's great that they're going to open the crossing, but we believe that it's really important for that crossing when it opens to succeed. And so we formed a little group that is trying to not only act as an advisory group, but also try to come up with some funding to provide some microloans to some of the folks over there for reestablishing their businesses, for getting inventory, fixing up the infrastructure, doing some guide training, getting them ready for some ecotourism, and so that when the crossing opens, they're ready to have visitors come over, so that when the crossing opens, people don't go over there and find that there's nothing to do or nowhere to go. Right. So that's one of the things that we're working on right now, is trying to get a little funding to get the community of Boquillas prepared for opening up again.
That's fantastic. So I wanted to, we're going to have a chance for all of you to ask questions to these folks up here, and I want to make sure we have a chance to do that. So we're going to wrap up our us talking.